Chronicles TV on air. We are now live in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to another episode of the Ace Attorney Chronicles. In the previous episode, we began the beginning of the Clouded Cocoa memoir. Today, that's right now, we're going to Mr. Locksmith's Lodge. Oh ho 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 ho! If you're hyped today's episode, make sure to like, push it out. Isn't that the guy that was having a conversation about someone the other day and we never figured out his name? What on earth?
Oh my, the gentleman is deceased, without question. He's dead.
Welcome to the Mr. Naruhodo Esquire.
Mr. Natsume.
Why? Why is this happening? Why to me? I've only just got out of court yesterday. I was finally home after 2 days of misery. And then wake up the next day to this. No early bird should catch the worm like this.
Not dealing his blood once, but twice in his appearance.
Woeful worm without wiggle.
I see you're in high spirits again this morning, Mr. Mustache.
Ah, not the horrible Herlock Sholmes. Shove off. Show yourself to the door. I never invited you.
Mr. Sholmes came here with us. I'm quite sure he'll be able to help you, Mr. Natsume.
I am entirely at your disposal, Mr. Mustache. What can I do for you? Gracie! Here they are already, the busybodies. Ah, Inspector Gregson, what a pleasant surprise. Pleasant, is it? Gives me a heartburn every time I see your face at a crime scene, Sholmes. Aha! I deduce, Inspector, that your heartburn is a result of your excessive consumption of fried food. Good morning, Inspector. This is a crime scene, don't you go touching anything. Oh, or good morning to you too, Sunshine? Alrighty then.
Oi, I said hands up. You're gonna mess up the crime scene.
Oh, no, I just wanted to look, that's all.
Not a chance. I would know your kind. You'll mess up just by looking at it.
Someone's in a bad mood. There's certainly some bad air in here, isn't there? Ah! Oh, the window's closed off, that's right. Alright, sounds like I better talk to the inspector first and try to curry some favor. Favor. What a terrible thing to have happen.
It's only been 3 days since I was arrested for the incident of the pavement outside. And then, having finally regained my freedom, it starts happening again. Endless existence of excruciating experiences.
So the victim lived here on the ground floor and your room is just one story up, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. In a way, we were neighbors, I suppose.
So did you know the victim? Were you friends? Speak, Ben, speak! What's the matter with Soseki-san now? It was an innocent enough question, wasn't it? Why does he seem so shaken by it?
Well, I suppose he wasn't a complete stranger. But he did ever invite me to his room. Never! On my honor, I swear it.
What an extreme reaction. You're probably wishing you never asked how, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo?
When we found him here, I felt wretched, which is why I sent word asking you to come. Through the inspector over there.
Griggsy? So, Inspector, what was the victim's name? Who was he? Mr. William Shakespeare. He was a lodger here. As you can probably tell, he was an actor. A bit of a dead loss as it happened, or just dead.
Mr. Shakespeare?
It was the landlord, old Mr. Garadib, and the other lodger, Mr. Natsume, who found him. The fellow didn't rise as his usual hour, so Garadib got worried and kicked the door down. I don't think kick's the right word for him. But doesn't Mr. Gyurta have a bad leg? Oh, yeah, you're right there. It was that jittery Japanese hunchback over there who actually did the kicking. Really? Soseki-san? That guy? The victim was pretty hard up, it seems, even done some time aside for petty crimes. He had no memory, no place to go, and no friends. His only acquaintances were the people in his house. Miserable life and a miserable end to end it. So what exactly is Mr. Natsume still doing here? He's not involved in the investigation, so shouldn't you have sent him away from the crime scene? Well, I'm not saying it's because the fellow looks odd or anything, or that he acts suspicious. I thought it would be prudent to take a statement from the cohabiter. You nearly said culprit there, didn't you?
Oh dear, Mr. Natsume appears to be under suspicion again.
Certainly seems that way. He does just come across as such an odd fellow, doesn't he?
Poor man, how unfortunate.
Anyway, I can say much until the coroner gets here, but I don't think the fellow's been gone here that long. The body's still warm.
Even if the inspector would allow it, I don't think I could bring myself to touch a dead body.
Okay, we already talked to him. What else do you want me to do? Investigate the entire damn thing? Hey! What the heck are you doing this time? I'm getting tired of you just scaring me for no damn reason. Mr. Sholmes, what are you doing? Ah! You need only to deserve to know it, my dear fellow. Investigating naturally. There's nothing natural about that pose.
Mr. Sholmes, have you made some miraculous discovery?
Patience, my dear madam, patience. We've not been here in this room for 5 minutes. So far, all I managed to deduce is what actually happened.
My goodness.
Are we going to the thing again?
But isn't that everything we need to know, Mr. Sholmes?
Now that you propose the idea, I believe one can indeed see it that way. At the present time, I managed to draw into a trivial conclusion. The first, there was a physical struggle here last night in which the victim fought for his life. Oh! Ah. Mr. Natsume, what's wrong? Is something the matter, Is it something that Mr. Sholmes has said significant somehow? Said significant somehow? Said significant somehow?
No, don't mind me. Forget it, I was here.
And my second conclusion is that there was a poison lingering in the air here last night that passed the victim's lips.
Nonsense!
Alright, Mr. Natsume, why are you reacting so extremely to Mr. Sholmes' deductions?
No, please. Pretend I'm not here. Invisible, infallible, inscrutable, insignificant.
Impossible to ignore.
You must tell us everything, Mr. Sholmes. Spare no detail.
Is the time when I think it is? Let the theatrical tragedy before us be unraveled by my great deductions, presented for your pleasure in 2 acts. We heard some truly astounding great deductions from Mr. Sholmes in the past. Oh no, this will be no exception. One miracles will unfold before our eyes this time. So, my dear fellows, for your delight and wonder, let the curtain rise. For Sherlock Holmes, Logic and Reasoning Spectacular Act 1. Act 1, he says. The great deduction again. The game is afoot. Topic 1, cause of death. Yo! Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. Yo! Foam at the mouth of the disease clearly indicates that the use of poison. Butter! Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate which contains, you will observe, 1/2 size of bar soap. Bar soap! Meaningful, indubitably. Why is that soap set purposely upon his death? Like the victim last supper, in fact, yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer. It appears that young man's appetite was undoing. Taking up the arms in the form of the cutlery, the victim engaged in a deadly battle for his life. Yes, yet the struggle against his hunger was in vain, for in the end he couldn't resist devouring the slippery feast. That looks butter to me. But London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that take the contents of the plate. The soap and the lather about the young man's mouth are too perfectly matched to ignore. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to excessive ingestion of foul soap. Though personally, I have greater interest in the taste of foul candle wax, of course. Why, sir? Why? Poisoning from soap ingestion. Act 2. Suicide or murder. The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall the death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man die and die alone? The single teacup suggests the answer. But to draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be a foolish, however, certainty. The careful criminal could have absconded with his own cup to cover his tracks. Well, allow me to lift the veil of my doubt, my dear fellow. Indeed, what it reveals, of course, the broken lock. Though forced upon now at the time of the incident, this door was locked. And the sole key was in the victim's pocket. In other words, when the victim consumed the poison, he must have been alone. Along with his inferior soap, from whence wafted in the inferior scent. And with that acrid aroma lingering in the air, the victim met his end in a tragic solitude. We could take comfort only in the fact that his soul was cleansed on its way to the hereafter. No possible perpetrator present. That's your conclusion? Thus concludes the final act of Sherlock Holmes' great deduction. Interesting, yes. There's just one thing, Mr. Sholmes. You're disposed to identify just one thing, aren't you, Mr. Honorato? Pray, what concerns you? Well, no matter how hungry he was, do you really think the man would have eaten soap? That looked like butter to me. It's quite apparent that the man had barely a penny to his name. It's a curious thing, but to want to destitute soap can suddenly appear quite irresistibly appetizing. Someone wants to eat candle wax. How extraordinary. In truth, I have tried a little soap myself in the past. You've eaten it, you mean? My dear fellow, some time ago now. My postulation was that it would be cleanse my gut. And did it? And I was writhed in agony on the floor and spit the contents on my stomach. Yes, I believe it did. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Soap is quite poisonous. It has an unpleasant taste and leads to great discomfort. In summary, I cannot recommend it. Believe me, I wouldn't eat it, even if you did.
There's something that troubles me as well, actually.
Oh, what's that?
It's Mr. Natsume.
Oh.
I couldn't help noticing him shuddering and quivering out of the corner of my eye. Almost as Mr. Shum's deductions touch a nerve somehow.
Nonsense.
Well, the clenched teeth episode didn't last. I think, judging by Mr. Natsume's reaction, the great detective deduction may need some gentle correction in order to reach the actual truth.
Yes, Mr. Shum's observation deductions are sometimes a little too sharp. He has a tendency to hit the nail on the side of the head and drive it in an obtuse angle. And when he does that, it fails us to straighten things out. Alright then, let's see what we can do.
Yes, we must pick out the key words in Mr. Shum's quite brilliant deductions. And discreetly exchange them for something that makes a little more sense. If we can do that, I'm sure we'll arrive at what Mr. Shum's meant to say in the first place.
In that case, are you ready for the second performance of the day? Once again, my dear fellows, while you're continuing to light and wonder, let the curtain rise, where the Sherlock Holmes, logic and reasoning spectacular at Act 1. Here we go again. Course correction. Hold it, Mr. Sholmes. Can we make this fast? Careful observation of the victim reveals to us that the events transpired in this disco-laden room last night. Foam in the mouth of the disease. Why is he smiling? Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate which contains, you will observe, one half-sizable bar of soap. Meaningful? Indubitably. Why is that soap set to purposely upon the dish? Like the victim's last supper, in fact? Yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course. The fork reveals the answer. Hold it, Mr. Sholmes! Well, you can't deny that a fork implies that the man was eating something, or about to eat something.
Yes, that's true. If I were to decide to eat soap, I should prefer to use a fork than attempt it with chopsticks.
And of course, only half the bar soap is left on the plate.
But might there be some other explanation? Some material that proves whether or not the man really ate soap?
What the heck is that? So I'm assuming whatever the said Joy-Con drift is. Get back over there. Look, there's more soap on the floor here. Mr. Shamspeare must really love the stuff.
Let's not jump to conclusion, Mr. Naruto. Look closely at the soap. Do you see what fit along perfectly with the hot bar on the table?
What the? How could that be?
I think that they are two halves of the same bar that broke apart.
Okay, but what's this? Okay, the only explanation is the other half, so... Joy-Con drift, can you, like, cooperate with me for one bit? I said cooperate me for one bit!
Take that!
Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course! The other piece of soap reveals the answer. It being the other half of the soap on the table, in short, the victim was not eating soap at all. But it's obvious, really, where no depths of hunger could drive any man to attempt to eat soap. Even I, with my unquenchable thirst for practical knowledge, took only a single bite. But that begs the question of how the man was poisoned, because there's no sign of any food on the table. An excellent observation, Mr. Naruhodo, and one that furnishes us with the answer we seek. For London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the contents of the plate. Hold it, Mr. Sholmes! Mr. Sholmes is still pushing the soap argument then.
Perhaps he's suggesting the man licked the soap rather than ate it.
If soap in London is that poisonous, I don't think I want to be washing my hands with it. Well, there are no signs of any food in this room at all.
Of course, food isn't the only thing that passes people's lips, is it?
Hey, get back over there.
Take that!
Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the teacup. Indeed, cups have been vessels of choice for practicing poisoners over the centuries. And it would appear that the victim drank every last drop. There's no sign of food anywhere in this room. Which leads us to the immutable conclusion. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to the ingestion of poison contained in the teacup. So we still poisoning from ingestion, that's the thing. Next. Move it, Chief! The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall that the death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine and die alone? This single teacup suggests the answer. Hold it, Mr. Sholmes. The Western vessel for infused hot drinks again. It's already featured heavily in the deduction so far.
Yes, we can imagine so shortly his death. Mr. Shamspire
was having a drink of tea.
There could have been nothing remarkable about that, but what troubles me is Mr. Natsu's reaction when he heard Mr. Sholmes suggest it. There's more to deduction than it seems. We must closely examine the scene of the crime again.
Did the man die and die alone? Ah, what do we have here?
Take that!
Did the man dine and die alone? The other teacup suggests the answer. Yes, there were 2 teacups in the room all along. In other words, the strong indication that the victim's last supper, there was a guest present. Why use that guy's built? At the very least, we could say now with certainty that somebody else was in the room here last night. Oh god, my bad. Somebody here was in the room last night taking tea with the victim.
What are you talking about? Utterly unbelievable, unjustified, unreasonable.
To draw a conclusion such a meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. In which, what more can deduce about this possible guest at the table? Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Do you mean to say you know who exactly was in the room at the time of the victim's death? Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, the broken lock. Hold it, Mr. Sholmes. I'm not sure I like where this deduction is going now.
I'm afraid it's too late to go back to the halcyon days of eating too much soap. But the identity of the guest who was here last night when the victim passed away is something I have a very valid feeling about this. Well, you can try to ignore your feelings, but we cannot ignore the truth, Mr. Naruhodo. No, I suppose not. Time to look around again.
Yo, where's Gregsy in this entire story? This is sake. Pile of books. What's the books there for? It's empty. Empty of liquid, but full of air. That makes you think, doesn't it?
It makes me think that you're full of hot air. We should be thinking about who else was in the room at the time.
Bother. She saw us equipped in response with a clever than my original riddle. Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. At first glance, it seems that the only things in this room are the makeshift stage and the costumes. I overlooked 3 books initially.
I wonder what they are. Let's see. The titles read The Picture of Monsieur Lecoq, Canterbury Yearnings, and a Meal for Gabrielle.
Wait, I'm sure I've heard those titles before.
It could just be an incredible coincidence, but they're the exact same 3 books that Mr. Natsume purchased the other day.
What?
Yes, on the day of the unfortunate incident with Miss Green when stabbed. Soseki-san had just been in bookshop and bought them, that's right. And now those 3 titles are here for the room of the victim.
Yet Mr. Natsume claims never to have been here before. What does this mean? Do you think?
I really don't know. What make of it?
Take that!
Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the pile of familiar books. Quite so. It's no more mere coincidence that these 3 titles are here in this room. It's the link to the truth. Mr. Natsume, you purchased these books 4 days ago at the second-hand bookshop.
That's just a coincidence.
In that case, you will be able to bring the same 3 titles from your own room, will you not? This very moment.
No, never, non-negotiable.
If you can't bring your own copies here, it proves that these 3 books are in fact yours. Having purchased the books 4 days ago and returned to your lodgings, you were arrested the very next day. So, you could conceivably have brought the books here on that evening, but you never mentioned that. In other words, you could only have brought these 3 books here to the victim's room. Next! Last night, having returned to your lodgings after the trial conducted at the Old Bailey. In short, there is only one possible conclusion. The victim died here in this room last night as a result of poisoning. And that same night, the victim had a visitor. And that visitor was you, Mr. Soseki Natsume.
That concludes the final act of Herlock Sholmes' great deduction. Soseki Natsume at the scene. It's elementary, my dear.
Not again, not again, not again. Not again!
Well then, Mr. Natsume. It would appear you're going to have to accompany me down to the yard again.
But wait! Hold your horses!
Yes?
Door, key, locked, entry, exit, entirely impossible.
He's so flustered he's being even stranger than normal. What do you think of an alibi? You could have just made a copy.
What?
You live on the same building after all. You had plenty of opportunity, I'm sure.
But. Misery me!
Sorry, sir. You'll get your chance to give your side of the story later. The facts speak for themselves, Mr. Moustache.
You horrible Herlock Sholmes.
He really has found himself an arch rival now, hasn't he? Come on now, no dilly-dally. Outside, there's a carriage waiting.
Look up to him, Mr. Darno Esquire. I never imagined I'd be in this position again, but you have to help me, please. I'm innocent.
Alright, I understand. We'll come to your cell later and talk about it.
Oh, and one more thing.
Oh, yes?
My poor little kitty cat. Please give him breakfast for me.
That explains how we got Waga High. And so, his evil curse still apparently unbroken. Soseki-san found himself once again the prime suspect in a case of murder. To be continued? Thanks to the incriminating deduction of the great detective. My dear fellow, that arm belongs to you! To be continued? Well, at least that means Inspector Gregson is no longer here. We can examine the crime scene in more detail now. Yes, that's right. Ah, of course. What? Have you forgotten what the inspector mentioned before? It was the landlord, Mr. Garrett, who discovered Mr. Shamspear. Ah, Mr. John Garrett. Yes. I expect we could find him in the sitting room at the top of the floor as usual. Right, we must remember to go and talk to him later then. And with that, we'll end the episode right here, ladies and gentlemen. Like, comment, subscribe, Chronicles TV, and I'm signing out.